Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Grade 12 Mathematical Literacy webinar for this morning. I would like to just give another few minutes opportunity for the remaining learners to join the webinar. So please just stay with me, be patient. We will start shortly. Okay, it does look like the majority of the learners has joined us this morning. So just welcome again to the Grade 12 Mathematical Literacy webinar. We are going to start off right now. Before we continue, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kimberly Britt. I am the Educational Specialist for Mathematical Literacy. Before we begin, I would like to cover some basics. So if you are struggling to hear me, make sure your audio is on and your speaker volume is turned up. You will automatically be joined or muted when joining this session. Should you have any questions, you can ask your question in the question box below or on your right side of the screen. Otherwise, you can raise your hand using the icon. Now, to raise your hand, click the icon on your dashboard below or on your right. Download this presentation and additional resources in the handout box below or on your right. You will also find all this information in the question box below or on your right. And please remember to send us your questions. I would just like to take opportunity at this moment just to inform you that we welcome all questions. I will not be answering any questions during the session, and I will also not be answering questions at the end of the session, but I still encourage you to please ask your questions so that I can get back to you and provide feedback via email. I would also like to ask that you keep the questions content and discussion related, or if you have technical difficulties, you can ask those questions as well. But if you are going to ask questions irrelevant to the discussion, we will dismiss you from this webinar. I am also going to just introduce Marika Beckett. She is the organizer for this webinar, so you will not be able to hear or see her, but she is here at the back in order just to make sure that everything runs smoothly. And should there be any technical difficulties, she will assist and she will step in. Now, with that said, also be aware that the handouts for today's session, as well as the notes that was given during week 1 or last week, all of those notes will be available during today's discussion. So please go and download them in the handout section. You will see that it is in the panel on your right hand side or at the bottom of your screen. The notes on week 1 is also available in English and Afrikaans in the resource tab on guided learning. So you can go and download it there as well. Now, with that said, let us continue with today's discussion. Before we continue with today's topic of discussion, I would just like to have an overview of the topics that we will be touching on during term 2. So the first topic that we are starting off with is finance, which includes interest, banking, and inflation. The second topic that we will be dealing with is maps, plans, and other representations, which includes scale and map work. The last topic that you will be dealing with is measurements, which is covering the topics of distance, length, mass, volume, temperature, perimeter area, and volume. If you require a more detailed a detailed description of the topics, as well as the prescribed time that you should spend on each topic, I am referring you to then go download the notes that was given to you during week 1 or last week. That does include all the additional information with regard to the topics. Now, let us continue today with the discussion, which is going to be on loan agreements. Now, a loan agreement is an arrangement between two parties, a lender and a borrower, where the lender borrows money to the borrower with the expectation that the money will be repaid with interest in a predetermined period. Now, I would like to single out two terms used in the section we just read. The first term is, or the key point is, interest. Now, as soon as we borrow money from a borrower or from a lender or from a micro company, the amount that you borrow will also run for interest. So the interest that is going to be added to your borrowed amount can either be compiled using simple interest or compound interest. If you still have questions regarding interest and calculations in the topic of interest, you will see that the notes given to you during week 1 does cover that topic. So I refer you to go download those notes and make sure that you understand the topic well enough. The next key point that I would like to discuss is the term referring to a period. Now, the period refers to the time during which the lent amount or the borrowed amount will be paid back. So this will either be the number of years or the number of months, and you will see that normally this is the term or the period during which the loan agreement is to be paid off. And now the next thing I would like to discuss is that people take out loans to cover expenses such as student loans, car loans, home appliance, and furniture purchases. When we talk about a mortgage is a loan specifically taken out to purchase property. You will also find that in a question statement, they will give you an interest rate. Now, interest is the charge on a loan by banks or other micro lenders. This amount of interest is expressed as a percentage. Therefore, a percentage of the borrowed amount will be added to the borrowed amount in the form of interest. When we talk about a monthly installment, we refer to the small amount that is paid back on your loan amount each month. So when we ever refer to the small amount that is being paid back, we call that a installment. Now, before we continue, I would just like to quickly discuss the following 2 points with you. The size of your repayment depends on the following: the size of your loan, the loan term, and the interest rate. With that said, if you loan a very large sum or large amount, the repayment amount or the monthly installment is going to be a bigger repayment. Your loan term, that meaning the period over which you will be repaying your loan, if that period is a short time, then the amount you will pay back with monthly installments will also be a bigger amount. If your loan term is a large or is a bigger time, so it's a longer period, then your loan or your repayment by monthly installments will be smaller. Also pay attention that the interest rates also plays a big part in the monthly installment. If your interest rate is high, meaning a big percentage or a higher percentage, then that means the interest added is going to be a larger amount, and that will also make your monthly installment a larger amount. So to reduce the total repayment, you need to increase the monthly repayment in order to shorten the term of the loan. Now, what I mean by that is the sum or the total amount that you will pay back. That means the borrowed amount or the lent amount, including interest. To make that amount smaller, you can do one of 2 things. You can either increase the monthly repayment, meaning paying more of the borrowed amount each month, and that will shorten the period over which you are going to pay pay monthly installments. If you shorten the period, then the amount of interest added to your borrowed amount will also then decrease. So that is a great way in which you can reduce the total repayment over the period that you borrowed the amount. Now, when a borrower takes out a loan, they can borrow the entire amount or a part of the amount needed. So it's not always required for you to take out a loan on the entire amount of what the product or the thing that you are purchasing costs. You can also just simply take out a part of that total amount. Now, on this point, I would just like to quickly go over what a purchase or a hire purchase agreement is. Now, a person is able to pay a deposit, which is expressed as a percentage of the value of the product. This is called a hire purchase agreement. So if you are going to purchase furniture or appliances, household appliances, you do have the option of purchasing the product, paying a deposit, and then taking your product home. So what hire purchase agreement means is that you are in fact hiring the piece of furniture or the product from the person who sold you the product or furniture, and you are hiring that up until the point where you have paid off the amount loaned. Now, if you've paid a deposit, the outstanding amount will then be repaid in smaller installments over the predetermined period. Now, very important, when we talk about hire purchase agreements, only the interest added to that loan amount is always calculated using simple interest. So that is something that you need to know beforehand when you go into a test and exam paper, that when they talk about a hire purchase agreement, you calculate the interest using a simple interest. Now, once again, if you are unsure about how to calculate simple interest, please go have a look at the notes that was given to you during week 1. Now, I would like to start off with an example today. The examples that we will be covering during today's session is similar to the questions that you will be dealing with during a test, a task, or an examination. So please pay attention and make sure to ask your questions if you have any uncertainties. Now, the table below you will see includes the loan amount, the loan term of 20 years, the interest rate, as well as the monthly installment. The first question then reads as following. Calculate the total amount repaid at the end of the loan term. So you want to now determine what the total amount repaid is after the 20 years has run its course. Now, we will determine that by saying the total repayment is calculated by saying the monthly repayment multiplied by the number of months. So your monthly installment here is 9,280 Rand, and you will be multiplying that by the number of months. Now, you will see here the loan term is given to you in years. So very important that you will need to multiply that 20 years with 12 months, as there is 12 months in 1 year. So we are going to say 9,280 Rand multiplied by then the number of months. And that gives you a total repayment amount of 2,222,007. Oh, I see there's a mistake. I will just have to recheck that value for you. But the formula as well as the calculations are correct. And if you type that into your calculator, it should give you the correct answer. Now, we are going to continue with example 1. You will see that the content in the table remains the same. The next question asks you, calculate the total amount of interest paid at the end of the loan term. Now, very important, to determine the total interest, we are going to take the total repayment amount. So that is the amount that we just calculated in the previous question. And from that, we are going to subtract the original amount. Hence, this 700, let's see, there's no deposit, no. So this 725,000 Rand, that will be your original loan. Now, if we substitute these values into our derived formula, you can just put that into your calculator and it should give you an answer of 1,502,200 Rand. Once again, I apologize about this total repayment amount. That is incorrect, but I will be sure to correct it and then upload the updated notes to guided learning. So just have a look for that. Now, at this point, I would just like to see if you guys are still all with me. Are you learning something? Please just put your hand icon on so that I can see that you are all still listening and that you are still all with me. Great. I see many hands being put up. Great, thank you so much. Okay, now you will see that the next question, still continuing example 1, so the information still remains the same. You will see that the next question is going to be about graphs. So you will see in your grade 12 year, it is extremely important for you to be able to analyze graphs, to analyze information, and to make predictions around that information. So for now, we are going to be looking at the following graphs. On the y-axis is the amount paid back to the bank in Rand. On your x-axis is the number of months. Now you will see your term refers to 20 years, but 20 years is equivalent to 240 months. So that is where that comes from. Now our first question reads, graph A shows the total amount that will be repaid over the period of 20 years. Why is this presented in a straight line? So we are first discussing this graph drawn over here, graph A, which is a linear graph, straight line. Now, the reason for it being a straight line is that your monthly installments remain the same for the entire period. Therefore, the constant repayment of a monthly installment will cause for a constant increase in the amount being paid over the period. Therefore, you will see it is shown here by a straight line. Let's just get that. Okay, so the explanation also given here is the installment will be the same amount each month. The total repayment amount will increase by the same amount each year, hence the straight line. Now, if we look at the second graph here, we are going to be looking at graph B, which is the slightly lighter line drawn over here. So just make sure that you can all see that clearly. Now, graph B illustrates the total amount owed per month during the loan period. Why is this graph curving downwards, and is this graph not straight? Now, let's read this question again. It says here that graph B illustrates the total amount owed per month. Now, keep in mind that as every month passes, you are paying a monthly installment. This monthly installment decreases the outstanding loan amount. So you will see that the outstanding amount is slowly but surely going to decrease as you continue to pay your monthly installments. And you will see here at the end, there is a rapid curve going on there due to the amount rapidly becoming less and less. Just to read through the description here on the side, it says after an installment is paid each month, the amount owed will decrease. The graph decreases at an increasing rate because as the total amount owed decreases, the interest owed increases as well. At the end of the term, the amount of interest owed also decreases. So I hope that you all understand what I have just explained with regard to graph B. Now, the last graph that I would like to discuss is this black line over here, graph C. Now, graph C shows the total amount of interest paid over the period of 240 months. Now, you will see that this graph, it looks like it is almost starting off as a straight line, but then it takes a curved shape over here. So, why is the graph curving upward at a decreasing rate? First of all, you need to understand that this graph is illustrating the total amount of interest that is being added. So you will see here in the first few months of the period here, you will see that the outstanding amount is quite large still. And therefore, the amount of interest being added to your outstanding loan amount is still going to be quite high. A lot of interest is being added because the outstanding amount is still quite big. As you continue to see, you are now paying off on the outstanding amount, which means that the amount on which interest is calculated is decreasing, and therefore the amount that you are going to be paying on interest will also decrease. Just to have a look at the explanation here on the right-hand side, at the start of the term, the outstanding loan amount is high, and therefore the interest will also be high. However, as the total amount decreases, the interest also decreases at a faster rate. So I hope that you all understood my discussion regarding graph A, B, and C. Can you put your hands up? Let's see who is still with me. Did you all understand what I explained regarding these graphs? Fantastic. Thank you. I see many hands. Please, if you have any questions, remember to submit them so that I can get back to you at the end of the webinar. Now, we are going to continue from here with our next example. Before we do that, let us just have a look at a few key points that we need to discuss. So when we talk about monthly repayments, especially monthly repayments determined using the factor table, the following points are very important. So this formula given to you here will always be given to you in a task test or in a exam paper. This formula is also in your study guides, so please have a look out for that. Now, the formula used by a bank to determine the monthly repayment is the loan amount divided by 1,000 and then multiplied by the factor. Now, we will get to this section in a short while. Now, the factor depends on the term of the loan and the interest rate. So in order for you to understand what the factor is, you first need the term as well as the interest rate. Now, very important, the factor table, from which you will get this factor. The factor table will always be provided in a test or in an examination paper. So that is not something that you will need to study beforehand. And then the last thing that I will want to discuss is a prime lending. Now, when we talk about a prime lending, it refers to the benchmark used by banks to determine the rate at which clients are charged. So banks cannot decide or choose an interest rate just out of thin air. They are given a point of reference against which they compare and by which they decide what the interest rate will be for each specific borrowed amount. Now let's continue with example 2, which we are going to now make use of the points that we've just discussed. Now, example 2 says, study the terms below for purchasing an apartment. Now, the cash price is 558,400 Rand. Your deposit is going to be 10% of this cash price. At this point, it is still an unknown value. Your interest rate is going to be the prime, so that is that benchmark which I've just mentioned, plus an additional 1.25%. And then your loan term is 25 years. The first question they are asking here is to calculate the loan amount for the apartment. So hence, we are not going to be borrowing the entire 558,400 Rand. We are only going to be borrowing a part of that. So the first step that we will need to take is to determine what the deposit is. Now, the formula that we will be making use of is to say the total amount, which is this cash price over here, that we will multiply with this 10% given as a fraction. So if we type this into our calculator, it gives you an answer of 55,840 Rand. This means that before the borrowed amount or the amount which you are going to be borrowing is calculated, you first need to take the cash price and from that subtract the deposit. Now we have calculated the unknown value of the deposit. In order for us to determine what the loan amount is going to be, we are going to take this cash price and from it subtract the deposit, as I've just explained. And if you type that into your calculator, it is going to give you an answer of 502,560 Rand. Hence, this is the amount that you will be borrowing. Now we are continuing with example 2, and the conditions for the purchasing of the apartment all stays the same. Now, the next question asks you to calculate the interest rate if the prime is given as 9.25%. Therefore, this is the benchmark used by the bank and micro lenders. So if you want to determine what the interest rate for this agreement will be, you are going to say the prime, which is 9.25%, plus the additional 1.25%, and that gives you a total of 10.5%. This will be the interest rate at which the interest is charged on the borrowed amount. Now over here, this is the next important section here. This is what a factor table looks like. In order for you to determine the monthly repayment amount, you first need to understand what the factor is. Remember, we did speak about that formula that we are going to be using in order to determine the monthly repayment amount. In order for you to use the factor table, you do need to know what the interest rate is as well as the term of the loan. Now we already have both of those pieces of information. The term is 25 years and the interest rate is 10.5. And if we put in our vertical and horizontal line, you will see that it crosses here at 9.44. Now keep this 9.44 in mind as it is important for the next question that we will be covering. So we are still continuing with example 2, and you will see that the information here in the table remains the same. Now the question reads, calculate the monthly installment on the apartment. And for this, we will be using this given formula where they ask us to take the loan amount divided by 1,000 and multiplied by the factor. The factor is that value which we have just determined in the previous question. So we are going to substitute all the information into this formula. So our loan amount, which we've calculated, divided by 1,000, multiplied by 9,44. Remember that factor. And if we type that into our calculator, it gives us an answer of 4,744 Rand and 17 cents. So this will then be the monthly installment paid over a term of 25 years until the entire loan amount, which includes interest, is repaid. Now, before we finish off for today, I would like to just speak about one last thing. So you will see that if you type this into your calculator, it is going to give you quite a bit of decimals. Now, to avoid losing marks, make sure that you round your answer off correctly to the two nearest decimal places. You will see in a test and in an exam question, it is part of your instructions to always round off to 2 decimal values, regardless if it is stated in the question statement or not. Only are you allowed to round off to 1 or 3 decimal values or even more decimal values if it is stated in the question statement. But if there is nothing said with regard to rounding off, it is principle to always round off to 2 decimal values. And it is extremely important. The reason for me discussing this is if you round off incorrectly, regardless if the values in front of your comma is correct or not, you will lose a mark for your final answer. So please try to avoid losing those marks and make sure that you round off correctly. If you are still unsure about how to round off, leave a question in the question box and I will assist in the matter. Now, that is all for today. I would like to encourage you to leave your questions in the question box before we end this webinar. And also remember to go and download today's notes as well as the notes given to you during week 1. So go download that because it will no longer be available when this session ends. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Bye-bye.